Welcome, everybody. We're back again with Mish Men, M cubed.
M cubed.
I am one of your co-host, Dustin Labar, and to my left is the very honorable Mr. Adam Mauser.
How do you do?
I hope you guys enjoyed last week's episode where Adam led us on some very interesting information that I really enjoyed. Today, we're going to talk about something that some would argue is probably more intelligent. The United States Football League.
The bigger moneymaker than Frederick Bastian.
That's probably exactly right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the USFL. If some of you are listening and you're like, oh, that new league that's just started. Yeah. Yes, you're all right.
It is new.
But it also existed in the past. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. It's a very interesting story. And there's also a great documentary called Small Potatoes, Who Killed the USFL. It's on ESPN, and that's how I learned about this originally, because it was before my time, really. The league had ended before I was born. But it's very interesting. So first, Adam, I want to get, so you probably grew up, how old were you in the middle 80s?
So
84 to 87.
USFL kicked off in 83. I was 13.
Okay.
So that was like the sweet spot, 13-year-old boy, and then you see USFL kick off.
Okay, so you were familiar with it.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you remember specifically about the USFL before we get into some facts and some information?
To a 13-year-old boy, it's another football league.
Sure.
I was not enthralled with football. I watched football in the fall.
Okay.
And it was another opportunity to watch football. In hindsight, it was a lot of talent that went out of colleges into the USFL.
Right.
And then reintegrating them when that short window was like 2 or 3 years that USFL existed. Reintegrating them was it was interesting. There's a lot of interesting dynamics in it.
Sure.
And that's about all I remember as a competing league. Didn't last that long, and that's about it.
So before we start talking about the USFL specifically, so we know that the NFL now pays quite a bit of money.
Just a little bit,
Just a little bit of money. So if you're familiar with like football from the 60s and I would suppose even the 70s, a lot of these guys, these NFL professional football players, would play a season, go home, and then work a normal 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
I actually knew a guy who played offensive line for the Jets in the 60s. And when he came, he would go play for a season for, whatever, I remember how many weeks it was back then, 14 or 15 or whatever it was. And
especially the Jets.
Yeah, and then he was like, they're like, you can go home. We're not going anywhere. And he would come back and
bag groceries.
Seriously. And the brutal part about it is he was pretty crippled up.
Yeah.
So those guys took a beating, and then they were expected to go home, work a 9-to-5 job. Because now people associated, if you grew up any time after the 90s, really, you saw these huge ballooned NFL contracts.
Right.
So part of the reason that those started happening is specifically because of the USFL. That's interesting. So the USFL really was part of the reason that the NFL contracts had to take a step up.
That's interesting.
So let's start. We'll kind of feed into that a little bit. So the idea for the USFL or there had been some other competing leagues, but the idea for the USFL was created by this guy named David Dixon. Okay. And he had the idea in 65, but it didn't actually start happening until the 80s. Mm-hmm. So the idea was, hey, we're going to compete with the NFL, but not in a very direct way.
Right.
We're going to do it off-season NFL, off-season college football. We're going to have good players. We're going to compete with these guys. And that was kind of his plan. So if you go ahead.
David Dixon, was he he grew up in football, was part of the NFL in any way, or was he just a businessman?
He was a businessman. It says he's a market professional for the football league he marketed a professional football league that would play in the summer, but he was just a New Orleans businessman.
Okay.
So it was just somebody that was probably passionate about football, but had some money to throw around, which is like some of these owners that happened in the USFL weren't necessarily football players or fans, but they just had
saw an opportunity. Yeah.
So a couple interesting things is the David Dixon rule. So before we get into what actually happened, is he came up with this kind of plan. He's like, I want to compete with the NFL, but I want to do it in a very specific way. I don't want it to be like the NFL. So some of the things that he did, so for instance, one of his things were like, we need to play in NFL caliber stadiums. So that was his first thing. Like, we have to compete. We're going to have to compete in NFL caliber stadiums.
Just for the marketing of it. You can't have like some random farm field.
Correct. You don't want to be playing in like, Athens High School's football field when you're trying to compete.
Well, you're not going to sell tickets
You're
to
not
that.
going to sell tickets, correct. So he also, he wanted there to be, this is when they started to deviate from his plan and what we were talking about earlier. He wanted a salary cap of $1.8 million per year per team.
Salary cap. So and in $85, that's substantial, but not like it is now.
But it's not like it is now. And the other interesting thing he had was a territorial draft. So meaning if you were, the Florida whatevers, you would draft guys that played college football in Florida because you had already people from Florida watching that athlete play. Okay.
So do you mind if I pull on that a little bit?
I want you to do what I want you to ask as many questions as possible.
So that's interesting because essentially I heard a comedian refer to this. It might have been Seinfeld. That we're essentially rooting for a jersey.
Yes.
For professional sports.
Correct.
Because this guy, he probably went to school. He grew up in Alabama. He played football at Ohio State.
Yes.
And I live in Arizona. Now he's Arizona's guy.
Yes.
It's like, he's not really my guy. But he's wearing that jersey, so I'm going to root for that guy.
The perfect example of that is Joe Burrow.
Right.
Because people from like Louisiana
they're now Cincinnati Bengals
fans. But it's like,
he grew up in Ohio.
Come on. So those are some interesting things that he kind of like laid out, being like, this is how we're going to compete. But when teams started, or like Donald Trump was one of the owners of
the New Jersey Generals, right?
Yes, correct. That's great. I'm glad you remembered that.
So remember, he didn't want to compete with the NFL, but he was competing for people that would otherwise be watching other sports, like baseballs in the summer.
And he was also, so we're not going to compete with the NFL in one breath, but then as this league started, we're directly competing with the NFL on the players that we want to get.
Right.
So there were some we'll talk about them. They're pretty substantial players that you may not have known played in the USFL. Maybe not you, but other people may have not have known that played in the USFL.
Can I guess?
Sure, absolutely.
Herschel Walker
did.
I think he played for the Generals.
We can pull it up here really quick.
Jim Kelly.
Jim, you are correct.
That's the only two.
There's one big one that that really he's the reason that the contract got inflated.
And it wasn't Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker was one of the reasons, but when you talk about it, this guy was the actual one of the reasons he got like the biggest contract.
Was he a quarterback?
He was.
Because there was that class of 83 quarterbacks that were supposed to be the answer to everything. Yeah. AFC put a lot of emphasis in quarterbacks that year.
Correct. And
it turned out it was a losing bet.
So
plus the USFL.
The guy you're forgetting is Doug Flutie.
Oh, that's right.
Doug Flutie.
Wait. So who did he play for? It wasn't the Generals.
I'll have to pull it up here. I don't see it right off the top of I can't remember now, but we can pull it up easily.
I remember I watched that game where he threw the Hail Mary when he played for Boston College. I was over at my grandparents' house. And it's not like, again, I wasn't this huge football fan, but we were watching, the game was on, and then you see him like throw that Hail Mary pass. It was just incredible.
Magical, right?
Yeah,
magical.
It was. It was absolutely magical.
So let's talk about some of the teams that they had, because I always love to talk about the teams that
They're
had.
like football team names from a movie.
Yep,
that's what they seem
like. That's
like.
exactly right. So some of the teams that were from 83 to 86. Okay, or I'm going to, sorry. 86 would have been the projected team names. So the team that they fell through after that. So 83, 84, and that were the Arizona Wranglers. And then in 85, we had the Arizona Outlaws.
There we go.
Okay.
That's slightly better than Wranglers, which are jeans.
They were like, Brett Favre was like, I like this team.
Favre.
We had the Birmingham Stallions, which is that still the Birmingham Stallions now? We'll have to look up the team names before we end the episode. We had Boston, New Orleans. So the Boston in 83, New Orleans in 84, and then Portland in 85 Breakers. So they were the Boston Breakers, the New Orleans Breakers, and the Portland Breakers. Yeah. So when you're asking, do you know why the teams changed? That they moved markets like that?
I guess the market wasn't right, and they were just adjusting.
They had a really hard time securing one of the Dixon rules, which was a stadium. The NFL was not super keen on letting them use any of their football stadiums. So,
which is funny because they could make some nickel on it.
Sure.
But they probably started to realize, hey, they're taking some of our talent.
Well, I think anything that happens like that, you're like, oh, it's cute. It's cute that you guys are starting a league until you start getting like Jim Kelly is probably one of the best quarterbacks to ever play.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he started in the USFL.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's.
And then went to the Buffalo Bills and had some winning seasons. Yep. They went to the Super Bowl. They lost several times, but still
3 in a row, right?
Yeah,
3 in a row.
I was in upstate New York when that all went down.
People like not having a good time.
That they they're all in on their Buffalo Bills, and I was a Cincinnati Bengals fan, just living up there.
Okay.
And just get sick of the Bills.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I wasn't a big Jim Kelly fan, but a very respectable career.
Yeah.
A solid citizen, just a good dude.
Had he won 3 Super Bowls in a row, he probably is one of the best quarterbacks to ever play. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like
without a doubt.
Yeah. Okay. Then we had in 83 and 84, the Chicago Blitz.
Some great names.
Not going to give away their game plan. Then we have the Denver Gold.
That's a good name.
Because gold,
Yeah, clearly.
I mean, we're gold. The Los Angeles Express.
Yeah, it's very fast.
I mean, because they're, you want to get out of Los Angeles quick.
You see a blur, it's them.
That's the Los Angeles Express. We had the Michigan Panthers.
That's always a good name, Panthers.
I mean, Panthers, it's all right. It's a jungle cat. I'm okay with it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention some people will do selection of, let's say, March Madness teams based off of mascots.
We did that on the podcast.
I know.
We did that on the podcast.
I just finished listening to that, and it's funny. Just that some of the mascots are they're very unusual. There are some unusual mascots.
When we were talking about it on the podcast, and you're like, "Oh, this is just a guy." You're like, "That's the worst mascot I've ever heard in my life."
There's one team, one college that their mascot is the color green.
Who's that?
I will need to look it up now.
Is it Bowling Green?
No, it's not Bowling Green. Not
we're the green. I hate that. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. What do you think our mascot should be? It's like, have anybody thought of just a color? They're like, green? Does everyone like green? I mean, green's pretty good.
It means go.
Green is go. We're going to win. We had the New Jersey Generals, who were Donald Trump's. Right. Donald Trump's. He had a majority ownership in the New Jersey Generals. Just typically, Jersey teams don't do very good in some reason. Yeah. It's because they're gross, really. People from Jersey, I mean, specifically.
It's the Garden State.
Yeah, it is the Garden State. Garden of gross people.
Hopefully, we don't have any listeners from New Jersey.
I love Jersey. I'm just joking. It's a great place. The Oakland Invaders.
Yeah.
I mean, that's weird.
That's not a good name.
Yeah. We have an 83 and 84 season, the Philadelphia, and then in the 85 season, Baltimore Stars.
Okay.
We have
generic.
The Stars. We're just
we're great.
We're pretty good. The Tampa Bay Bandits. A lot of theft in Tampa Bay at that.
Yeah,
in that time.
That's not a bad name. It just seems like a name that Hollywood would pick.
It's not the worst. It's not the worst name. You ever seen Any Given Sunday?
That's what I was thinking.
That's like the team names. It's like the Washington Good Guys versus the Oakland Angry Men. It's like that kind of thing.
Bandits.
We have the Washington Federals in 83 to 84, and then apparently it's the same ownership. The Orlando Renegades in 85.
Renegades is another one of those names I kind of like, but it's like Hollywood name.
Renegades is a good name, just being honest. The Houston Gamblers.
That's a good name.
I mean, would it be the Vegas Gamblers would be a little better?
It would be way better if it was in Vegas.
Yes.
Because I don't know if Houston's known for gambling.
Yeah, I sure don't. I'm not sure, but I mean, what are they gambling on? It's not like
oil futures.
Oh, there you go. Okay, you got me on that one. The Jacksonville Bulls. Yeah. I mean, they're just like.
There's already the Chicago Bulls, but
I hate this one. I hate it. The Memphis Showboats. So. Yeah.
That would be good if it was the 1800s with showboat gambling.
Yes.
But,
No, they're just like a couple guys. The Oklahoma Outlaws.
Outlaws is another one of those Hollywood names, but it's good.
It's pretty good.
It's like a B name.
It's not great.
Yeah.
The Oklahoma Outlaws, alliteration is always...
It's a winner.
It's always good.
Like Mishmash Men.
Mishmash Men is great. The Pittsburgh Maulers. which is, I mean, I don't like it specifically.
Maulers.
And then we have the last team, the San Antonio Gunslingers.
Yeah.
I don't love it specifically.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about.
It's 3 syllables.
Yes. So it's too much. So let's talk about. We'll talk about like kind of the history of what happened here. So 83, 84, they started playing. They had like a draft, expansion teams. They were competing really well in off-season NFL play. Okay, so
right.
they were like, hey, we're doing really good.
Did they have like a TV contract at the time?
So yes.
Okay.
But also, so this is a really good point. They got like multi-million dollars in multi-year contracts for, I think, CBS and there was one other media organization for off-season springtime football.
Right.
That was after the 83, 84, 85. So they're like, hey, you guys are doing really good. We'd like to bring you on. The start of, so off-season 85 is when they all started turning these contracts down. And they said, nope, we're going to do it during the NFL season.
Oh.
So that's kind of like when the NFL kind of picked up and was like, I don't think so.
I see. I did not remember that. I don't remember that at all.
The 86 season never happened.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it was kind of all...
They went bankrupt at that point.
Went bankrupt.
Yeah.
So they were doing really good. They were competing well against the NFL, and they were getting some actual talent. Like I can read you some of these league MVPs.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, oh, okay. So like Jim Kelly was the league MVP in 1984.
Yeah.
Makes sense. 1985, Herschel Walker, who played for the New Jersey Generals.
Right.
You have some like really great talent. Steve Young. Oh, Steve Young.
That's right.
Steve Young.
Yeah, before he went to the 49ers.
Mm-hmm. He played for the LA Express in 84 and 85.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Reggie White.
Oh, that's right.
He played in 84 and 85. Jim Kelly. We have Marv Levy, who was a coach for the Chicago Blitz.
Yeah. Who eventually coached Buffalo Bills.
Correct. So I mean, they have some like legit talent, and they're competing with the NFL. And there was a couple players that they went after, like Dan Marino, who ended up playing in the NFL. So they had the choice to get drafted or to move on to to get drafted by the USFL or go play with the NFL.
Yeah.
So here's where it gets tricky. The NFL is a more established league. They're going to get your name out there more. It's obviously like the mecca of professional football. So how does one compete with that? The answer is money.
Money.
So that's how these they were like, the USFL was like, guess what, everybody? No salary caps.
Okay.
So they instead of that $1.8 million per team, they were like, nope. I think Doug Flutie, it doesn't say it in this article, but I'm pretty sure, and we can look it up before the end of the podcast, I think Doug Flutie's contract was the first multi-million-dollar contract. It may have been just over $1 million for him to play in the USFL. So that's when the NFL started getting a little scared and started upping their players' contracts to not lose their players to the USFL.
It'd be interesting to know when you look at their books,
Mm-hmm.
like did they have, because you can go out on a limb at much higher risk as a business owner of a team or the total USFL team. Like no salary cap, we will underwrite you up to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to broadcast that. But did they have the market for that to support that, or is it just like we're proceeding at risk because we want a hostile takeover, we want to be a big deal, and we want to outcompete the NFL?
From my reading and my opinion on this is we have all these prominent businessmen that are owners. We're going to throw money at this because we think we can compete. So like, if Doug Flutie, Jim Kelly. If Jim Kelly's like, hey, I'm going to sign for the NFL or I'm going to sign for the USFL, and they're like, hey, the NFL's rookie contract is, who knows what it was in the 80s.
Yeah, let's say $200K.
Let's say it's $200K. But the USFL's like, hey, $1 million.
Yeah. I'd do it.
You're playing professional football. You really haven't, as a player, this is my opinion, as a player, you really haven't written off the NFL, in my opinion.
Right.
If you say no to the NFL and then you go to the USFL and you have a really great showing and the USFL falls off, you're still, which happened.
Yeah.
He made his money and then still got to go play in the NFL.
Right.
So, you know, when somebody's like threatening that, which I think is a different lane that the USFL has taken this time, which is why I think it's starting to be a little more successful. They're not trying to directly compete with the NFL.
Which is wise.
They're saying, hey, are you second tier talent? Are you much better than a normal college football player, but you're not NFL level? Well, hey, do you need some years to compete and maybe you can make it to the NFL? They're making it a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Versus direct competition.
Almost, is it more of a minor league?
I would call it a minor league. I think that's exactly what it is because they're not really going after NFL talent. They're not
like an arena football minor league. This is like
correct.
Yeah, open
so
field.
I think that they're not looking at really highly touted NFL prospects and being like, hey man, we'll pay you more, because I think they think it's not going to work. I think what they think can work is, hey, we can make a lot of money as a minor league team, and maybe the NFL will absorb us as a minor league team. Is kind of my feeling on it.
That kind of jives with other conversations that we've had when it comes with NCAA and paying players, et cetera, and that relationship between a university and their sports program.
So obviously they're getting some really great talent. They're competing, but they're not doing great, especially when they decide to, hey, we're going to compete directly. So they literally turn down multi-million-dollar TV deals and years, like 3, 4, 5-year contracts.
That's crazy.
To be like, you know what, we're going to compete directly with the NFL.
I wonder if there's been any business studies on that, just like purely looking at it as a business through that lens of the available market.
Yeah.
Because they were competing with summer sports, which is largely baseball.
Right.
And so, there's a certain share of the market you're going to get on network TV and actually cable, which was burgeoning at the time. So you had TBS, you had WGN out of Chicago, which were major players, and they could broadcast nationally to some extent.
Right.
So they were able to get some amount of contracts. The market wasn't too tight when it comes to broadcast of their games, which gets you revenue. It gets you attention, so you can sell merchandise and you can sell tickets if somebody's in the area. So it'd be interesting to look at that as a case study. Like, when would you make that jump? Because you got this comfy spot where you're competing with baseball, but you're doing okay because there's always a football fan that hates baseball, let's say,
but loves sports.
I just want to watch some sports instead of the news or read book on economics.
Right.
And so here I am. I'm competing for that guy. And to say, all right, I'm ditching that.
Right.
I'm going to go against the big dog.
Yeah.
So that decision is not a light decision.
Right. I would think, as a very lay person in terms of this business situation, as a lay person, 3 years seems very short-sighted.
Yeah.
I would say you would want to be, you want to be like generational fans. So I'd want to be like 10 years. Like maybe I was 20 years old when I started watching the USFL. Now I'm 30. I'm watching it with my son on my lap.
Right.
My son starts watching the USFL.
We're always Generals fans.
Yes, so that when it switches to a different time, you're like, well, I have to watch the Generals. They're my team.
I hate the name,
but
I love the Generals.
And I love that Donald Trump is our
the Outlaws. Just can't get enough of it.
Can't lick the Outlaws. Are too good.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my opinion on it. It's like it seems like they were trying to, which seems like a very like Donald Trump decision to be very like aggressive.
Yeah, very bold.
Very bold, but like I would want, in my opinion, you almost have to, because now you're talking the NFL is very generational. Like parents are watching with their kids and their grandkids, and they have teams that they've been watching for forever. And now when you're competing, so like you're kind of a Generals fan, but you're also a Jets fan.
Yeah.
Like, and both of them are playing at 3:00. You're probably going to watch the Jets.
Yeah.
So,
well, my dad was a Cowboys fan.
Okay.
Because he liked Roger Staubach.
Okay.
Roger Staubach, Navy guy. My dad was in the Navy. Roger Staubach, a fine American citizen.
Yep.
Good, solid guy. Played for the Cowboys. So I kind of like the Cowboys too, even though I grew up in Cincinnati. And we, if it came down to it, I'd root for Cincinnati, even though they weren't that good.
Right.
And then so when the Cowboys took off, it was like, yes, they're good again.
Yeah.
And I was a big Cowboys fan. I got kind of soured of professional sports at large, but but that generational thing, like my dad rooted for the Cowboys, I wanted to root for the Cowboys because he was.
Right. I mean, so like when I'm reading these articles about this, and I'm like, God, that seems like such a risk, a crazy risk to take, being so short, and you based on the teams and where they're moving, nobody's really settled yet. So you don't have this ingrained fan base to go compete with the NFL. So that's
like 2 years when they're making this decision.
Right. So, I mean, I can understand them giving them a TV contract for off-season NFL because as a football fan myself, there is after the Super Bowl, sadness. You're like, oh,
yeah,
there's no football on.
Wait till August.
But, the XFL started. Well, I think we're going to talk about that briefly if we have time. But the XFL started, and I started watching it because it's just football on, and they're pretty good athletes. They got some different rule sets, so it's fun to watch.
That's what makes it interesting. It's the different rules because things that you kind of want to see, and quite honestly, the NFL with some of the rules of late. Yeah,
well, now it's a nightmare.
It's just turned into this. Yeah. If you see old This Week in Football, like the preview for it, you see every one of those tackles that happens, collisions.
Yeah.
It would be the guy would be thrown out of the game and maybe out for the season.
Specifically, I remember watching an ESPN documentary where there was this defensive lineman and he would have the athletic trainers cast his arm every game because he would use it as
in
a
a
club.
plaster cast.
Yes, because he was like, I use it as a club.
Yeah.
And he was like, I would try to end people's careers. Like if I tackled them, I wanted to kill them.
Yeah.
Which was, you had a little bit of fear in you when you were a quarterback and that guy's trying to hurt you.
Right.
Now there's a little less fear. But so as a failing league, what do you think the USFL did as being we're failing? What is the only way to come back from this?
So so I better understand the question.
Yeah.
So our numbers are down.
Correct. We're trying to switch over to prime time.
I need to get attention. I need to create some controversy that'll be interesting to folks so that they will draw in. Right. So I might have some kind of team owner act like a lampoonish idiot.
Right.
Or I'm going to get a guy that maybe didn't do so well in the NFL and kind of a troublemaker.
Right.
I'm going to bring him in. I just need to get attention.
That's what they should have done. Do you know what they did?
No.
They said, we're going to sue the NFL.
Oh, yeah. Take them to court. Yeah, that's always a winner.
So we're going to take the NFL to court for having a monopoly. So they were like, the NFL has monopolized professional football. We're going to sue them for X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
So the USFL.
Wait,
go ahead.
Let me just interject there. So this group of people that created a league.
Yep.
That they were competing for viewers.
Correct.
Of professional sports. They weren't in direct competition, but they were a cheap imitation of the marquee, right?
Yes, correct.
The top of the zenith of football,
right,
which was the NFL.
Right.
But they had a league.
They did.
And they were paying players.
They were.
And they were making money.
Correct.
And they decided to take on the big dog.
Right.
They got handed to them.
They did.
And then they're like, well, but it's a monopoly. That's not a monopoly.
No, I mean, they were like, hey, it's a monopoly. So the best part is.
No surprise they lost.
Have you ever. They actually won.
Oh, they did.
By name only is what the thing was. $1.
$1. Yes, I do remember that.
They won $1.
$1.
So legitimately, the NFL paid $1 to shut down the USFL.
It's like trading places.
And the judge actually, there was some reason, but they tripled the amount of money. So the USFL actually won $3.
Oh, that's generous.
But the guy in the documentary, you'll see it. He actually has the check for $1 still in his.
That's sweet.
In his desk drawer. He keeps it just as a remembrance.
Got a great story.
So I find this fascinating because the whole drama, and I'm sure in the 80s, the early 80s, this was hysterical. But just like you said, it's like, all right, we're going to do this off season. We're going to take a run at this. We're going to create our own league. We're going to do it good. We're going to get great players, and we're going to really take a run at this. And then literally they couldn't wait 5 years. They were 3 years in. They're like, you know what? Let's go ahead.
I'm going to make my move now.
Let's go head to head with the NFL. Yeah. What's that, Donald Trump? Yeah, that's right. Let's make America great again.
Yeah.
And let's go and take these guys on. And when they couldn't, they were like, well, you guys are a monopoly. And whether you think they are or not, I mean, you made a bad decision, and you
very bad,
and you got what was coming to you. So that brings us to today.
Are there any of the same people involved today that were involved in it? Not the players, obviously.
Not that I know. Yeah, Jim Kelly's still out there. He's like he's going to win his championship. No, not that I know of. This didn't say anything about somebody being somebody still being part of it now. But
Who's the USFL owners, if you will?
That's a good question. I don't know.
We can talk about it.
We can look it up. That's not a big deal. So if you guys are familiar now, so do you remember a couple years ago, they came out with another football league, the AFL? It happened maybe in 2018.
You're not talking about the old
No, this is
AFL.
In 2018, they came out with a new league that would be similar to the USFL, but it was called the AFL.
I don't remember that. And so just in case you're wondering, there was an NFL and there was an AFL, and they merged, and they're just championships. That's how we get to call it a Super Bowl, because that's what they called it. It's like, okay, we have the champion of championships.
Right. So in 2017, 2018, they started the AFL, which would be like what you would consider the USFL now. It was another football league that started. It lasted one season, and it was gone.
No wonder I wasn't paying attention. I blinked.
So maybe I should have said before that, the XFL came out.
I remember the XFL.
And the XFL, if you listened to a couple episodes ago.
I was like, when they came out with the XFL, I was like, okay. They tried the USFL.
Right.
They're just trying to WWF eyes.
Yep. Or WWE.
Or WWE.
Yep.
They're trying to have a much more over the top, ostentatious version of NFL that a lot of people crave.
Yes,
but
correct.
Is it sustainable?
So this is what's interesting to me. So when the XFL came out, it was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But yes, Vince McMahon started the XFL. Yeah. So that if you listen to a couple episodes ago, he is also the owner of the WWE/WWF.
Right.
And it was Extreme. They've changed the name now. It was the Extreme Football League. So, and it was weird things like you could stab people. I don't know. You could really hard tackles. They had some different rules. It lasted about maybe 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, the guys could have whatever name they wanted on the back of their
jersey.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny.
It was funny.
It was almost studio wrestling like.
Yes, correct. It was like,
and I think that was intentional because they were trying to get some carryover audience from wrestling, which was very, very popular back then.
Correct. So they kind of fizzled out. Then 10, 12 years later, the AFL came out, and that was nothing. That lasted 1 season, and it was gone. The talent, I think you tread a really weird line, because you have to have talent good enough to make people watch,
right?
And so that it's not a joke.
Right.
Like, you can't throw a guy a 5-yard pass and have him fumble it onto the ground and be like, well, this guy should be.
It can't be like people like you and me out there playing football.
Like, you can't have me run an out route and then like me and the defender trip and fall and the ball flies over.
That guy's winded and he ran like 5 yards. Like, well, he's 53.
Yeah. Well, he's got an oxygen mask on the field. He's carrying it behind
smoking
him.
cigarettes while he's running routes.
I think that guy's smoking a pipe. So that fizzled out. And then we heard that the USFL was coming back.
Yeah.
And then the XFL came back again. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So we had the XFL gone, the AFL gone. Mm-hmm. Then the XFL came back again for 1 season.
Okay.
Then it fizzled out. Then do you know who took it over? The Rock. The Rock is actually the main owner of the XFL. Yeah. So it just came back this season. And then the USFL also came out last year.
Right.
So now we have the USFL.
Exclusively in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah, they played all the games in Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah. All the teams played all the games.
So that's where you want to go for professional football.
And we actually looked it up on Reaching for the Bars, but you can get like season tickets for like $4. It's like so
I've had friends that go down and they watch several football games, and they said it was a great entertaining time.
I think it's probably fun.
Yeah.
So
I just don't want to deal with the traffic.
No, I don't want to either. But they're not playing them exclusively in Birmingham this year. So they're going to be some other places.
I wouldn't mind getting some tickets.
Yeah.
But just do an overnight trip down there.
Do you want to get some of the expensive tickets are like $100 and you get like a box and you get like all this crazy stuff?
As long as there's good food.
There's going to be good food.
When I mean good, I don't mean like, well, it's got to be like 4-star restaurant good, but something better than chips and
I think it's better than that.
Cocktail weenies.
Although cocktail weenies are good.
They are good, but
I understand what you're saying.
Sustenance, nah. I mean, at least a full-sized hot dog, a hamburger, some tacos maybe.
Ooh, tacos would be nice.
Yeah.
At a football game?
In fact, tacos, you could stop right there.
Yeah, that's actually
It's got your lettuce, your tomato, your cheese.
I do also like Hebrew National hot dogs, though.
Those are good.
Those are really
good. Mustard.
Oh, those are pretty good. Yeah. I cook them in the oven sometimes. You'd be surprised how good they are.
So quick sidebar, I have got turned into a cooking bacon in the oven.
It's very good.
Yes.
As long as you have the correct equipment.
Yeah, you got to have
You have to have a raised rack.
Yeah, it's got, or you can use foil and make your own rack. But now we've gotten advanced at the Mauser household.
Oh, okay.
So we have like this giant pan because we make a pack at a time.
Yeah. You have enough people that you need a lot of bacon. Yes.
Well, and I love bacon. I can
It's
literally eat a whole
me.
pack.
Yeah, I can too.
By myself.
Yes.
But with a grid on it, like a cooling rack. Almost. But it's for that, specifically for that pan. And the grease drains away. I save the grease, use it when I'm making eggs.
You cook your eggs in bacon grease?
Oh, yeah.
Laura hates it. Dude, I cook mine. Every time I make bacon, I make eggs right after so I can have eggs.
So good.
It's so much better.
Yes.
All right. Speaking of eggs, so we have concurrently, we have the XFL and the USFL both playing.
Right now.
Right. I think the USFL starts in a couple weeks, but they're going to be playing simultaneously, basically. Off season, we have some college stars, which is what you would think a league like this would do.
Yeah.
Is they're having some not top tier stars, but maybe some guys that weren't drafted or were practice squad guys. And maybe this guy says, hey, I'd rather be a starting quarterback in the XFL or the USFL versus being a practice squad quarterback.
Right.
You know, all these kind of situations. This is actually interesting. The USFL is currently owned by the National Spring Football League Enterprise Company, LLC. And they are a joint venture between founder Brian Woods and Fox Corporation Sports Unit, Fox Sports.
That's interesting.
So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I think it's great for football. I like the fact there's more leagues. I like the fact that they're in off time. Right. I think they should always heed what happened to the original USFL.
Yeah, you can't compete against the big dog.
And just stay off season, right?
Yeah.
And so
are the XFL? Do you foresee the XFL and the USFL merging?
Yes, I think that they will, because
I think they should.
So yes, because in my opinion, part of the problem is you have less than NFL talent.
Yeah, diluted market,
and then you're splitting that talent into, so you're taking lesser on each side. So the smart play is combine those two to whatever you want to call it, the USXFL or whatever you want to say it is.
The other guys.
But I think you become a more competitive league in terms of your viewership, and it's too many teams for people to deal with.
Yeah.
You're not going to want an XFL team, a USFL team, and an NFL team, which is basically what you're making people do.
Yeah.
You're making them have 3 separate teams, which is not going to happen.
They got to market that right, though. That could be, when it comes down to it, it's the fans' association with their local team, because that's who's going to go see the games, right?
Agreed. Yes, correct.
And if you look at minor league baseball in the Huntsville market, we had a minor league team, Huntsville Stars.
Okay.
We went to a couple of the games. It was fun and all. The stadium was down off of Research Park. It was entertaining. It was, minor league baseball. It's good to watch.
Right.
Because you're watching legit baseball.
Yep.
And it's enjoyable. And baseball is one of those sports where you're not like, it's not like this active thing where you got to just like be constantly watching this activity. It's a much more slower paced game, but their pressure is much, much higher.
Right.
And key points especially.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, the team died for whatever reason. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But they brought back another team, but they have marketed it correctly.
Right.
They have a good location for the stadium. It's new growth. They're they came up with a name that was just kind of silly at first, but now it's like this lovable name, now the Trash Pandas.
Yeah, it's a big deal, yeah.
And it's like, I go to Trash Pandas games. Like I took my son to and a couple of my daughters to that. We have a box at work.
Okay.
So sometimes we'll get tickets and we'll just go out there to the game. I sing the national anthem out there for my barbershop chorus. So it's like a fun activity. It's a good location. So hopefully this upstart league will take a page from that. Instead of saying, okay, we're going to play our games here in this one city. Right. We want the people of that city, that market that doesn't necessarily have a football team, but we can get a small audience and they're pumped about their team. Correct. And they're excited about that team, and they love that team, and they buy their merchandise and they wear it when they go 100%. To whatever. That's the way to go about it.
I think the NFL desperately needs something like that.
Yes.
To be
like a feeder league.
Yes, correct. I think it's just, I think it would make the talent better. I think it just makes it more interesting. Just like baseball.
Yes.
Because we had a local team when I grew up, in Wilkes-Barre Scranton. It was the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Yankees and the Rail Riders. It may still be the Rail Riders, but you would and we had an amateur hockey team that was like division, or it was like the step down. So they would go up to the Penguins.
It's like slightly below the NHL.
One step below the NHL. But you would cheer for those guys like crazy.
Yeah.
And then when they would go to the NHL, you'd be like, I watched that guy.
Yeah.
Score 3 goals against, whoever. And you were like totally invested now in watching him play for the NHL. So you would turn on the NHL game just to be like, oh, is this guy going to play? Because I watched him.
There's got to be that connection.
Correct.
There has to be that connection.
So I think the NFL is something that they desperately need. And I think that's like, you kind of get twofold. You get like this extra money off season from these other teams that are playing. But then you also have a feeder directly to like, you're not going to the, when you need a kicker, you're not going to some guy that's been, doing nothing for 3 years.
Yeah.
You have this guy that's been kicking for a team, making a living, still in practice. You have like a better, a situation in terms of getting talent up. And I do believe I would guess in the history of the world of football, there's probably a guy that didn't get drafted that would have been a great star in the NFL but never got a chance.
Right. Or he didn't peak at the right age.
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So, like, Kurt Warner would be like a perfect story.
Oh, he is the perfect example.
Where he got lucky, but how many people are like, he won the championship. He
was literally bagging groceries.
He was.
And playing arena football.
Yep.
And he was on the team known as the greatest show on turf.
Yep. They were and that year they were unstoppable. You couldn't stop that offense.
I was deployed when they during the season.
Yep.
Then I came back for the Super Bowl, and it was like, because I never saw any of the games, but then I'm watching the Super Bowl. It's like, this
is unbelievable.
Is amazing.
Yeah,
it is amazing. And to hear his story,
it's
amazing. And so those folks that watched him play in arena football, instant audience right there.
100%.
Like, they're like, the guy's likable.
Mm-hmm.
He's got this great story.
Yep.
And now he's kicking it in the big league.
Yep.
And so now, why wouldn't I follow him? So the NFL should be interested in a quote unquote farm league.
I agree. I 100% agree. So just to round out the episode, I think it'd be fun because we kind of started with some of the team names.
Yeah.
So let's start with these are going to be these are the current USFL teams, and then we'll do the XFL teams.
Okay.
Just for fun. So you have the Michigan Panthers.
That's a good name.
The New Jersey Generals.
Yep.
The Philadelphia Stars. The Pittsburgh Maulers.
Maulers is such a fun name.
It's aggressive, right?
What do you do? I'm maul.
I'm a mauler. I maul, yeah.
Mame.
The Birmingham Stallions, and that's where all the games were played in Birmingham last year. We have the Houston Gamblers, the New Orleans Breakers, and the Tampa Bay Bandits. So what I like about it is that they kept some of the old school names.
Yeah.
I think that's like a nice shout out to like where they came from kind of thing.
Well, and that goes back to that instant audience.
Yes, agreed. Like maybe your dad's like, I used to watch the New Jersey Generals.
I was 14 and I'm from New Jersey and I love the Generals.
Yep, that's exactly right. So
make USFL great again.
Make USFL great again. Donald Trump's like, I'm back. So the XFL teams are the Arlington Renegades.
It's a common name now.
The DC Defenders. Yeah. I don't like it.
MEH.
The Houston Roughnecks.
That makes more sense because they're oil rig guys.
They're rough, yeah.
I had a friend that was a roughneck on oil rigs.
Okay.
Golf, yeah. He was always talking about being a roughneck. I was like, is that like a job? He's like, yeah.
Well, now it's a football job.
Yeah, now it's a football.
Now you can be a roughneck. The Orlando Guardians. Yeah. So this is, you're going to ask me what this is. I'm going to tell you. The San Antonio Brahmas.
Like a bull? That's an Indian bull.
The Rock's name in wrestling was the Brahma Bull. He was the Rock, the Brahma Bull. He has a Brahma Bull tattooed on his arm.
Gotcha.
Which I think he had covered up because it's kind of embarrassing. But he now he has like a full on sleeve. But it was the Brahma Bull. The Seattle Sea Dragons.
Yeah.
Because we all know the Sea Dragons.
Yeah.
They're pretty tough.
They'll get you.
Yeah, they'll get you every time, especially in Seattle.
Puget Sound.
The St. Louis Battlehawks. I mean,
Battlehawks.
I mean, just it's a normal hawk with some armor on, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then we have the team that the Reaching for the Bars team picked, the Reaching for the Bars crew picked, which turned out to be the worst team in the league.
The Vegas
Vipers.
Yeah, Vipers,
I mean, they ended up being the worst team in the league, but we didn't know that at the time.
It's slightly better than our team that we don't have.
Yes, correct. Slightly better than that. So, so that's what I got today. I thought it was a fun, just a fun thing. Like
that was great.
USFL.
Yeah. And it's an interesting study for multiple reasons, but just group dynamics, sports, professional sports.
Yep.
Some business aspects. It's all
tangled up in there.
Yeah, it's all tangled.
I love it.
It's a mishmash is what it is.
It is a mishmash.
Yeah.
It's a mishmash of stuff. So this was a super fun episode. Adam, thank you for dealing with my
I found this interesting. I found this keenly interesting because I remember it.
Yep.
And then I hear about it now. And I think the reason I don't pay that close attention because I saw it, tried once and fail. I'm like twice actually with USFL in the 80s and in XFL in the early 2000s. I'm like, all right,
yeah,
you guys got to figure something out because you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Yeah, you're right.
So it was good.
Good. Well, that was super fun. Please like, subscribe, comment on any of our videos. If there's a topic you guys want us to hit on, please, message it to us, email it to us, comment on any of our videos. We'd love to have some ideas, but if you're enjoying it, please like and subscribe, and then unsubscribe and resubscribe, and do all that cool stuff.
Several times.
Yeah, several times, as many times. Like us on Instagram, like all of our stuff. We're gonna keep doing this thing because we really enjoy it.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, we'll do it if we have 0 listeners, just because this has been fun.
Even if we have negative listeners, we'll keep doing it.
We get slurs hurled at us through the internet.
Yeah, even if people hate it and they're begging for, if they're signing petitions, we'll still do it.
Yeah, I'm going to get together and talk about random things with Dustin.
Yes, the Random Things podcast. All right, guys. Well, it's been fun. We'll see you next week. Have a good day.
All right, good day.
Bye-bye.